This is Countdown to Kickoff, where we show you games, players, or teams in program history on the road to opening kickoff. Next on the list, number 6, Walter Thurman III, Demetrius Williams, and DeAnthony Thomas. A Los Angeles native from West Covina High, Walter Thurman III played at Oregon and was a star member of the D-Boys, the unbelievably elite secondary of the mid-2000s consisting of Chung, Jarris Byrd, and TJ Ward, as well as Thurman. Thurman paired track speed with ball skills, finishing his career with 12 interceptions and all Pac-10 honors while contributing as a dangerous return man. In 2008, he tied for the conference lead with 5 picks, including a game sealer in the Holiday Bowl. Unfortunately for Thurman, his dangerous return ability is what cut his senior year short, when he tore 3 ligaments in his knee week 4 against Cal on the opening kickoff. Thurman was drafted in the 4th round by Seattle in 2010, where he found himself part of another elite secondary, the Legion of Boom, winning a Super Bowl ring before closing out his career with the Giants and Eagles. Demetrius Williams arrived at Oregon from De La Salle High School and became one of the Ducks' most dependable playmakers of the 2000s. Over the 4 seasons he played, he caught 162 passes for 2,600 yards and 20 touchdowns, leaving Eugene ranked 3rd in receptions, 4th in yards, 4th in touchdowns, and 1st in 100-yard games with 11 games. His senior year in 2005 was his peak. He and Kellen Clemens had Oregon rolling to a 10-1 start with Williams as a primary target and big wins over Cal, Arizona State, and a ranked Fresno State team. The Ducks climbed to number 5 in the BCS polls, but when Clemens broke his ankle in November, Williams was left carrying the passing game with backup quarterbacks who struggled to get him the ball, and Oregon slid out of BCS contention. He was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens in the 4th round of the 2006 draft. Crenshaw native, 5-star, and number 1 rated athlete in the nation, DeAnthony Thomas flipped his commitment from his backyard USC to Oregon on signing day in 2011, a recruiting shockwave that signaled that the Ducks were able to utilize blue blood level talent and acquire it. Thomas wasted no time in justifying the hype, scoring 18 touchdowns as a true freshman, including the 91-yard run on his first carry in the 2012 Rose Bowl, still the longest run in Rose Bowl history. For 3 seasons, Thomas was Chip Kelly's ultimate Swiss knife weapon, a blur at running back, receiver, and returning, finishing with 3,200 all-purpose yards and 41 touchdowns. Thomas was nicknamed the Black Mamba, and his stats proved it. Strike fast, strike hard, and strike deadly.
Foot race to their sideline. Touchdown, Oregon!
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, children of all wages, welcome to the show today. Get ducked after dark. Unfortunately, I got a little bit of a late start. I have kicked off high school football coverage this last Friday, so things got a little delayed on that front. Today, I think, is going to be a very, very fun show, or should I say tonight? We'll kick off your week with 6 days left until Oregon kickoff. And there's a lot of expectations, uncertainty, and excitement to go with it. But I do want to start. Sorry if my face is shiny. It's very hot here in San Diego. And I probably look a little red too because I was out in the middle of the heat on the turf with no shade in El Cajon, California, which, if most of you, I assume, doesn't know about El Cajon, California, it is 20 or so miles inland from the coast, so it is a very desert climate and therefore 20 degrees warmer with the beating sun, much like a sort of Arizona desert feel. It is much hotter and much less shade and escape from the sun. But it's fun, so I don't care. I don't mind being in the sun, but I do have my trusty towel with me here today to wipe off because, again, I sweat like a southern preacher. Well, the weather isn't just hot, but apparently my takes are. I exclusively did not want to be a hot take merchant a la Stephen A. Smith or those on those sports debate channels, but sometimes I guess you just can't avoid it, even though my takes are grounded in history and not just opinion to get clicks. I think a lot of Duck fans will understand not playing for clicks. But that doesn't exclude the legion of retards and the king retard that decided to comment under my YouTube video featuring Marcus Mariota. And I had a follower on TikTok who is my favorite follower because he basically just said, I think that that's a crazy take, what I said about Marcus Mariota, who single-handedly willed a team that probably didn't belong in the national championship game against Ohio State. So that apparently has made me a hot take merchant. So I guess, you know what? I'll get the t-shirts made. Hot take merchant. That'll be me. So what was the hot take here regarding Marcus Mariota's senior season, or last season, I think junior season, really? He left early, I believe. His 2014 Heisman winning season. Well, there is a sector of Duck fans who apparently got booty tickled by what I said about the Ducks not really belonging in that national championship game against Ohio State. Now, the first quarter, it was somewhat close score-wise, but if you actually watch the tape on the field, you would see that Ohio State was nevertheless going to pull away. And I watched the full game in real time. I was actually in class at school watching the game on the computer. So I saw it in real time as it happened, and that was the same conclusion I came to 11 years ago as I do today. And again, TikTok guy just said, hey, that's a little crazy, but didn't say anything other than that. However, the other fans, or the I'll say the head retard, because he decided that he was going to speak for the rest of the retards and speak on their behalf. And basically was like, that's a disgraceful take. It's disgraceful and disrespectful. I've never heard anyone say anything similar to that. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and bring up a soundbite, and you can make that determination for yourself.
You know, Marcus winning the Heisman, but there were some major flaws with that 2014 team. Marcus basically willed a team that had no business being in the national championship to the national championship. That was one of the worst defenses that Oregon has had in my lifetime. And it was because of Mark, like I talked about with the lineage from Hugo Bezdek to Shai Huntington, and being forced to carry over Bezdek's program, Shai never being able to make it his own program. The same thing happened with Mark Helfrich after Chip Kelly left. Mark was never fully given the reins to make the program his. And one of the key factors, and you hate to call people out, but they were forced to make Don Pelham the defensive coordinator. Coach Pelham did great as a linebackers coach. As a position coach, he was great. As a recruiter, he was great. He was completely outmatched as a defensive coordinator. And fans started to hear secondhand about in-game coaches screaming at him, run a blitz, please, just do something. We started calling it third and Pelham. The number of third and long conversions that Oregon gave up in 2014 were absurd. Marcus Mariota was so good, he single-handedly willed that team to a conference championship, a Heisman Trophy, and a national championship game. A team that did not have the talent or the coaching schematics on the defensive side to compete. Maybe in that first round, but they were not on the level of Ohio State, and they proved it within the first quarter or two. Not that the players on defense were bad, they were set up to fail by a terrible, terrible defensive scheme. And coaches that, I mean, love them. They were in the program for years. They helped build the program. They should not have been in the position that they were. And that was so noticeable to players, to alumni, to fans, to boosters. And it's just a shame to have a generational talent in Marcus Mariota come along to lift up the program the way he did. Not only everything he did on the field, but what he did off the field too. Just class through and through. An incredible person. And to be stuck with a program that ultimately at the end of the day we knew could not win at all from a schematic standpoint, that coaching is going to fail it. And going up against Ohio State's third string quarterback in the national championship, that was obvious. It's a shame that players were not being positioned to win.
I don't know about you, but that wasn't my voice. I didn't say that. I'm not the only one who said that. Shocker. That was a snippet, a soundbite. I'm not going to have the same footage over the top, but that was a snippet and a soundbite from my hopefully upcoming documentary one of these days. I'm working title, I think, is Duck Luck now. I think I've changed it to Duck Luck. But if you'd like to donate, the link below for my GoFundMe is there. I have done 2 interviews. I have a couple players down here in a couple players down here in San Diego that I'm trying to get the logistics done to do the interview. But one of them is currently coaching at the high school level down here in San Diego. I assume I'm going to bump into him at some point this season when I cover the San Diego section of the CIF 2025 football season. Okay, so let's establish some things here. This is for anyone who is familiar with the Ducks program and been a fan long enough, you start to maybe be a little bit honest about things. And we know that compared to the 2011 national championship, that the Ducks belonged in that national championship, as they probably should have won that game. However, they lost by a last-second field goal to an Auburn team led by Cam Newton. And the defense in that game contained Cam Newton pretty darn well. It was actually Dyer, who was down, that really carried that team with Nick Fairley on the defensive side, stopping the Ducks' high-powered offense at the time to hold Oregon to only 19 points, which if Oregon just had one more, which they could have without a shoestring tackle on Lavoisier Tuanay, who had a wide open spot to the end zone. If it were not for that shoestring tackle, would have at least scored about 24 to 25 points and probably ended that game as national champion. Now contrast that with the 2014 national championship that the Ducks lost to Ohio State and with a Heisman winner in Marcus Mariota. Now, I'm going to start off with a bit of a story here, and this is going to be sort of a illustration and visualization of what I'm talking about. Now, I played football, basketball, and baseball I played football since 3rd grade, and I played basketball since 4th grade, and I played baseball since 5th grade. And then by the time I became a junior in high school, I had quit football and baseball to focus on basketball. Now, in 7th grade, this was the era of time where our basketball team would do a lot of tournaments, travel tournaments. And one of these tournaments we joined in Portland, Oregon. Sorry for the pee popping. We went in Portland, and it was a bunch of teams that were 7A, A team, B team being the lower division. We were a 7 grade A team. And so we played other A teams with a couple B teams sprinkled in there. And then there was one team that we played. They were the AAU team from Portland, the local AAU team. And in this game, we lost 88-44. We were basically just bodies there for them to practice their 3-on-2 drills and make sure that we don't twist their ankle while they dunk on top of us. These kids were dunking at that age. And later, though, in that season, when we returned south into the Mid-Willamette Valley, our team actually won our league championship, the 7th A league championship that same year, despite getting trounced in that tournament game against the AAU team. We earned that championship, but we did not belong on the same court as that AAU team. That's just the facts. They are an entirely different level from us. And inversely, they didn't belong on our tournament. They were way better than us. They were really just, shaking off some rust, loosening up the hamstrings for their AAU season. They didn't belong just as much as we didn't belong. I guess if you were going to go as far to say had no business. But they had no business, or they had business too, but they didn't belong. There's a distinction there. You have to be honest with yourself. Because after we won that seventh grade A league championship, we didn't go ahead and say, oh, well, let's start playing AAU ball. Because we knew. We knew where we were. We knew exactly the type of team we were and where we belonged. And we had success where we belonged. And when you actually play team sports, also, because this was pointed to me that it wasn't just Marcus that took them to the national championship; it was a team effort. Now, sure, everything is a team effort. Success and failure is a team effort. Whenever you were on the practice field, do you ever remember when one player screws up, you're running lines the rest of practice? Because your team is only as strong as the weakest link. And Oregon had a weak link that year. And to put this into perspective, because also I was told what team deserved to be there over Oregon. Now, the results on the field is what grants deserving. And I never said that they didn't deserve. They just didn't belong. But let's look at paper instead of field or on the field results. So this is according to the ozone.net, which is unfortunately a suck-eye operation. But they have a few numbers here, the S&P Plus ranking, which, if I know correctly, it's strength of schedule plus power or something like that. I can't remember the metrics. It's a bunch of nerd shit. But let's look at the inaugural college football playoff teams, the Final Four. You have Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, Ohio State. Now, the matchup in the first round was Ohio State versus Alabama, third-string QB, who, in the national championship, was on his third game. Now, their offensive S&P was 4. Their defensive S&P was 24. And they beat Alabama, whose offensive S&P was 1. Their defensive S&P was 1. Ohio State upset Alabama to get there. It might have been a different story if Alabama played Oregon that first round. Just saying. Now let's look at the Oregon to Florida State matchup. Florida State offensive S&P 2. Florida State defensive S&P 17. Now let's look at Oregon's offensive S&P ranking 5. And finally, 24 defensive S&P and number 4 offensive S&P in Ohio State matched up against Oregon at 5 offensive S&P, which made sense in the first half. And then you have Oregon, whose defensive S&P in 2014 was 41. 41. A 24-point ranking difference from Ohio State. (41 versus 17). The two worst defenses in the playoffs went up against each other. And guess what? The worst defense lost again. 41. And again, there's no denying that Oregon had talented players on that squad, okay? You had even after the injuries that happened in the Rose Bowl, by the way. But you had Cardale Jones, the third string QB, who looked like a superstar against Oregon when Ezekiel Elliott wasn't gashing them. Cardale Jones was like a Ben Roethlisberger type. He wasn't speedy necessarily, but he could scoot and he could avoid hits. I guess you could also say he was a bigger Jameis Winston, which then goes to show why weren't they prepared when they were supposedly prepared for Jameis Winston in the Rose Bowl? Because the gap in the teams were way different. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. Oregon didn't really, they probably didn't belong in that game, and it showed. In fact, again, let's take a look, because those motion graphics that I had on that soundbite were a little too fast, because I also didn't want that soundbite to go for too long. Frankly, at 2 minutes, it probably went a little too long. But let's take a look at some game film here. I'm really not usually a film analyst type, but let's just illustrate my point even further. Okay, so we have the opening kickoff, so on and so forth with this. And we're just going to go here. Heavy pressure on a screen, a wide receiver screen. Marcus Mariota still gets hit on a play that supposedly is supposed to be one to save. Now, Cardale Jones, this is 3rd and mid, gets to play, gets to run around. This guy, he was in position to keep him inside. Look at all this time, though, that we have here for him to throw deep in his own territory. And if you don't know, too, that the on that play, the field position was there at the 5-yard line. Cardale Jones was in his own end zone. They brought someone up, a defensive lineman, to disguise a blitz, a.k.a. he went up there showing blitz, and he drops in coverage, a 3-man rush. And if you look at that video the rest of the way and slow it down, I don't really know how to do this on streaming to pause and play and shit like that, because I'm still sort of new to this, and I'm an old fuddy-duddy in that regard. But you see a lineman just standing around, an Ohio State lineman just standing. He's got no one to block. He's got no one to block because everyone else is taking care of him blocking. And even if you did blitz that one guy, you only had 4 people on the line going after the quarterback on a 3rd and long in their own end zone. You end up with a 3-man rush, everyone dropping into coverage. No pressure. You can't get pressure on a 3-man rush. You got to blitz in that situation. You'd rather risk them getting a first down at the 15-yard line. Why not? It's a field position game on that front. So, hot take maybe. Despicable? No. And my only response to that really is like, are you 14? A 14-year-old girl? I honestly can't even say that because my sisters were 2 years apart, and even when they both synced up their periods at that age, they weren't as bitchy as some of these fans. Just a whiny chicks. That's what you people are, I swear. And here's the thing, though. This is a fandom cultural thing because even when you win, there's things that you have to do to change your execution or your game plan. So even when you win, there's still things you have to change. And I'm not trying to be a cynical, the cynical negative fan. In fact, this is a very positive space for Duck fans everywhere. It's only when retarded negative people come in and they try to throw their hat in the ring on what they think is respectful, disrespectful, or despicable or not. And it's just and just because your wheels got your your spokes got the wrench put in them doesn't mean you get to do that to others. And this isn't really a matter of opinion because the numbers don't lie. They were outmatched in that game. They didn't really belong. And that's fine. It's fine. Take the L and move on. It was still a magical season. We got our first Heisman winner in program history. We owe a lot to Marcus Mariota. But that doesn't mean you whitewash history, okay? We already have enough of that. The green and yellow glasses. Green and yellow glasses. And there's this other Duck fan that I come across every once in a while on YouTube. We exchange comments every once in a while, and I gotta say he's one of my favorites to speak with because he is so on point. He left a comment on YouTube that was perfectly. I could not have put it any better. It was poetic, and it really cut to the core of exactly the problem with Duck fans in general. And this is an intervention for you guys, for that group of you that can't take any criticism and you get butthurt and booty tickle because someone said something you didn't like. This is an intervention. Because you're the same people that will be like, "Oh my God, how did we lose the Rose Bowl? How did we lose the national championship? How are we not champions? How did this happen? How did we get upset by Stanford again? How did we lose to Arizona State? Arizona, how did this happen?" Because the rest of the season, you're talking the team up without being honest about them. And then you have the balls to call people like us that see what we see. Take a look at my episodes last year. When I said from the get-go that Oregon's probably not going to win a national championship. They didn't. It's common sense. It doesn't take much to notice things. Now, I'm not a defensive coordinator, but I'm not trying to be one. At best, I could be a position coach for defensive backs and wide receivers because that's what I played. I can see those things. I can teach technique, not the chess match. I know what to do in a cover 2, cover 4, cover 3, man-to-man, all that kind of stuff. But I can't look at formations and predict it. On the personnel side, on the game, on the execution side, I can tell these things. I was very close to being wrong last year. The Ducks defied my expectations. Frankly, the 2023 team had a stronger roster probably than last year's team. And yet last year's team went farther. But the chickens came home to roost in the Rose Bowl, didn't they? The secondary didn't prepare. They were lost on coverage. It wasn't even that they were necessarily untalented. Clearly there was a talent gap, but come on. 34 points in the first fucking half. 34 in the first half. There were plays where Tysheem Johnson and Cam Alexander looked lost. They were running to a side of the field no one was. And they turned around like, what? And Jeremiah Smith was behind him running to the end zone. Mbuka, I think, is the name of the other guy. I get him confused with Smith and Jigba on the Seahawks. But it's green and yellow glasses. Green and yellow glasses. I love the teams as much as the next person. I will still root for them no matter how good or bad they were. I have parents and aunts and uncles, older relatives that were around during the great suffering in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s before Kenny Wheaton retroactively turned the team around in 94. I started paying attention to the team, or I should say I was old enough to start paying attention to the team when things were starting to pick up. And then after a few years, there was a couple dips with 7 and 6 seasons and all that kind of thing. I was in Corvallis as a middle school to high schooler, standing 10 toes deep in that city full of Beaver fans, wearing a Jonathan Stewart jersey. I was there with Dennis Dixon's poor performance against Arizona in 2006. Standing in the student section with my oldest sister watching us just fumble that game away. And it was raining. I was in Reeser in 2006. In Reeser. The only Duck fan in that section. The north end zone. Again, wearing my Jonathan Stewart jersey. When Brady Leaf and Dennis Dixon were both playing. Because there was no outright starting quarterback in that Civil War game. Getting beer thrown onto me as a freshman, 8th grade freshman, getting yelled at while, my dad and my sister, who at the time were Beaver fans. My sister's still a Beaver fan. I think my dad doesn't really care anymore because of the way that Oregon State treated him. Which I'm hoping to have my dad on this show, actually, and discussing NIL because he has very good perspective on it. He was working at OSU while the Beavers won their 2 national championships in baseball, and so he has a pretty good behind-the-scenes look on sports and money. So I think it would be an interesting conversation NIL-wise. But I was there. And those years were no surprise to me. The guy I interviewed for my documentary on 1.2 said that being a Duck fan is a bludgeoning. And back in the day, it was because they were terrible. They were almost kicked out of the Pac-8 at the time because of how bad they were. No one was going to the games. It was basically just girlfriends and family members at the seats in Autzen Stadium. And they almost got kicked out of the conference. And then there's now where they're expected to win every year when they haven't won the big one, but we still win the big one every year in our hearts. And then at the end of every year, we take the moral victories. We may have lost, but we lost like champions. And yeah, you can't win every game. And that is one of the things that I would like. That is one main message of this channel that I would like to get out there, is that these guys are playing a sport and you just can't win every game. And they can't accept a loss. They can't accept anything bad being said about their precious Oregon Ducks. And don't get me wrong. If anyone on the internet, Beaver fans, Husky fans, Ohio State fans now, USC fans, if any of them start, it's like the same thing of like, you can't bully my sibling, only I can. And, you can have all these complaints about America as a country, but when a British person starts mouthing off, then you start screeching eagle, oorah, uber patriot. That's what it is. But the very thing, though, when you bully your sibling, many times you're being honest. I want to see the Ducks succeed. So did Nick Saban when he was coaching Alabama. And he was screaming. He was screaming at his players when they were up by 60 points because they weren't executing what he wanted the way he wanted. Kenny Dillingham, former Oregon offensive coordinator, now at ASU, roasting his team on television in front of reporters as a soundbite. Roasting his own team. Does he want the Wildcats to win? Does he want to be the bottom of the Big 12? No, of course not. He wants to succeed. He's a fan of the team that he coaches. But he's honest. I'm going to bring up Brandon Duck's comment on a YouTube video that I just love. It's perfect and encapsulates everything that I'm talking about and the entire thesis of the intervention that Duck fans need to have. So let's go ahead and take a look here at this. All right. We'll just keep it like that. What does the comment say? In case you can't see, I'll read it for you. He wakes up in the morning and chants offense, offense, offense. He wears his green and yellow glasses to bed and in the shower. He still listens to Sup With You Girl, and he's never participated in Shout. He thinks defense wins champions is a saying for no reason and has no merit. He'd rather win a game 56-55 instead of 24-7. He thinks Brian Bennett should have won the Heisman and Jeff Mail got drafted. He is the most green and yellow glasses 2010 fan in the world. Stay in the hurry up offense, my friends. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. Let me go ahead and bring my ugly mug back up on there. That's just beautiful. And I think the problem is the breakup between Chip Kelly and Oregon is the fans of Oregon were the scorned lover as Chip Kelly left for a younger, hotter model version of us. And so we're a bit of a scornful lover in that way. But I think the Chip Kelly era was sort of a double-edged sword. I guess here's another hot take merchant moment. Because yes, he took us to new heights that we couldn't really think before. But he barely recruited. He could really give a shit about recruiting. And if anything, he was a system recruiter. So he didn't care if the 2-star or 3-star, and not that stars always matter, but the 2-star and a 3-star would fit his system best. He'd recruit them over, a big playmaker. DeAnthony Thomas being the lone exception because he was a 5-star but also fit, which is why he was a generational talent. And he could really give a shit about defense. That's why Alioti really had to stay. He probably wanted to retire long before he did. But he stayed. Because Alioti was one of those defensive coordinators that could make 2 and 3 stars overperform and reach beyond their ceiling, probably. Just imagine what Dan Lanning or what Nick Alioti could do with Dan Lanning's roster now. It would be something. But here's the thing. We also created this culture that, just like Brandon the Duck said, defense wins championships have no merit. And that's why we have 0 championships in those 2 to show for it. All we want is an offensive highlight reel. That's all it is. That's all we care about. That's why these same fans also are like, Luke Moga needs to start. I don't believe in Dante Moore. First of all, here's the thing. Coaches, they look for different things than the fans do. When we're talking about who is going to be a starting quarterback, who's going to be a starting receiver, running back, so on and so forth. When they're evaluating people, they look for things that are completely different than the fans. So it doesn't matter if Luke Moga run fast. He's not ready to be the starter. That doesn't mean that next year or the year after he won't. But as it stands right now, the past 2 spring games, he had great spring games. That's awesome. It's great. I love what I see. I love what I'll hopefully see in a couple years when he's fully developed into being ready for the starter. But they're not looking for icky cool highlights. The coaches, they're looking for different things. And these same fans are also surprised that Lanning hasn't discussed who the starting quarterback is, like there's some sort of huge issue going on with who's actually going to be the starting QB. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Who knows? It's not up to us as fans to really decide or predict that. But also, this isn't something out of character with Lanning. He's done this every year. Even when Bo Nix showed up, he was like, it could be anybody. Ty Thompson's doing pretty decent in camp. Who knows? He plays everything close to the chest. He comes from the school of Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. How haven't you guys picked up on this? Dante has different things that they're looking for, which is most likely why he's going to be the starter. And that's cool, okay? I understand the UCLA stuff. But again, you don't know what it's like until you've been there. And when you're on a team, when you're a true freshman thrown into the fire like that, again, with someone who is extremely aloof like Chip Kelly, you just he was thrown into the fire, and again, he made the mature decision to realize he probably wasn't ready for that yet. So he went back to the school that he originally committed to and decided, you know what, I'm going to take some time to get this right. Because he could have ruined his career if he tried to stick it out at UCLA just for playing time. Because there's more to it than just playing time sometimes. So we will get that litmus test now to see, okay, he's in a better program and at least a more stable program with coaches that theoretically can they transformed Bo Nix's career. They helped, get Dylan Gabriel into the pros. I don't know if they really helped him that much. He kind of had the same performance as the teams before, but if anything, it got eyes on him, I guess more eyes on him that put him on bigger stages to have him play well and maybe go from like a fourth, fifth. Maybe he switched draft spots with Shedeur at that point after being at Oregon. Who knows? Maybe Shedeur would have gone third and Gabriel would have gone fifth if he never went to Oregon. So, but this will definitely be the litmus test, how Dante performs. And players, coaches, former players who have access to the practices have all good things to say about him. So I trust them over some fan that goes Luke Moga run fast. Because they're still in that era of Chip Kelly where they want to win shootouts. And then again, they're surprised. Why did we lose the big game? When we finally went up against an elite defense, or at least a defense that was twice as talented or better executing than ours. It does not matter what era you are in. Defense wins championships. The best way to win a game is to hold the other team to making less points than you trying to score more points. And also, this is not something new to the Oregon program, okay? It's actually more new that we have a good offense. A little bit of history for you guys. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, mainly the late 70s when Rich Brooks took over, they created the gang green defense. And their whole idea, because they didn't have playmakers on offense, really. Musgrave was adequate. He was good. I think he was an All-American. So he was good. But also it was basically just Musgrave. And now Chris Miller, Tony Graziani, Danny O'Neill. All solid players for the program. But let's just say they weren't the next Marcus Mariota each time. So basically the whole idea of Oregon's strategy was, if we can, as a defense, hold the opponent's offense to under 20 points, we'll win the game. So they wanted to make sure they had an elite defense. It was always defense first. It was only until the later tenure of Bellotti and then Chip Kelly showing up that then we were just an offensive team. It would have paid off much better that we became balanced. We added to that defense and not just took away the defense in switching for the offense. You look at Alabama, years that they won. They didn't necessarily have elite offenses. Not every time. They had good ones. Like as we saw in 2024, they were the number one S&P offense. And then you had the Tua year. I think Tua was a little bit after that. Jalen Hurts, all that. But what they had was a defense. You had Georgia, Stetson Bennett, Carson Beck. I wouldn't call them the second coming of Peyton Manning. But they had a top 5 defense. Or top 10, whatever. They had the highest tier defense you can get. Defense wins championships. And Oregon as a program, and the fans love to talk about how innovative and revolutionary and forward-thinking that Oregon that the program is. And while that's maybe true with uniforms and veer and shoot offenses that have been adapted to shotgun and all sorts of things like that, that might be true. But for some reason, when it comes to Lanning changing the culture of being an SEC prototypical defense-first, smash-mouth football team that plays in the trenches, SEC Big Ten as well, slugfest football team, that's just a huge blind spot. It doesn't do much for you. So, green and yellow glasses. It's okay to be partial to your team, but also critical. I mean, did you see when Alabama lost to Vanderbilt last year? Every Alabama team was calling for Kalen DeBoer's head. Fire him now after one loss. They're ruthless. Didn't mean they weren't Alabama fans. They have a winning attitude. They want to win. Now, granted, does some of that fandom go a little too far? I think every team has that. Sure, yes. Because again, sometimes you just got to take the L, no matter how much it hurts. The 2007 New York Giants didn't belong in that Super Bowl on paper. And they won. It happens the other way too. It just does. So we are going to take a small little break, and then we're going to get back into the positive zone and not the toxically positive zone. This is Countdown to Kickoff, where we show you games, players, or teams in program history on the road to opening kickoff. Next on the list, number 6, Walter Thurman III, Demetrius Williams, and DeAnthony Thomas. A Los Angeles native from West Covina High, Walter Thurman III played at Oregon and was a star member of the D-Boys, the unbelievably elite secondary of the mid-2000s, consisting of Chung, Jarris Bird, and TJ Ward, as well as Thurman. Thurman paired track speed with ball skills, finishing his career with 12 interceptions and all Pac-10 honors while contributing as a dangerous return man. In 2008, he tied for the conference lead with 5 picks, including a game sealer in the Holiday Bowl. Unfortunately for Thurman, his dangerous return ability is what cut his senior year short, when he tore 3 ligaments in his knee week 4 against Cal on the opening kickoff. Thurman was drafted in the 4th round by Seattle in 2010, where he found himself part of another elite secondary, the Legion of Boom, winning a Super Bowl ring before closing out his career with the Giants and Eagles. Demetrius Williams arrived at Oregon from De La Salle High School and became one of the Ducks' most dependable playmakers of the 2000s. Over the 4 seasons he played, he caught 162 passes for 2,600 yards and 20 touchdowns, leaving Eugene ranked 3rd in receptions, 4th in yards, 4th in touchdowns, and 1st in 100-yard games with 11 games. His senior year in 2005 was his peak. He and Kellen Clemens had Oregon rolling to a 10-1 start with Williams as a primary target and big wins over Cal, Arizona State, and a ranked Fresno State team. The Ducks climbed to number 5 in the BCS polls, but when Clemens broke his ankle in November, Williams was left carrying the passing game with backup quarterbacks who struggled to get him the ball, and Oregon slid out of BCS contention. He was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens in the 4th round of the 2006 draft. Crenshaw native, 5-star, and number 1 rated athlete in the nation, DeAnthony Thomas flipped his commitment from his backyard USC to Oregon on signing day in 2011, a recruiting shockwave that signaled that the Ducks were able to utilize blue blood level talent and acquire it. Thomas wasted no time in justifying the hype, scoring 18 touchdowns as a true freshman, including the 91-yard run on his first carry in the 2012 Rose Bowl, still the longest run in Rose Bowl history. For 3 seasons, Thomas was Chip Kelly's ultimate Swiss knife weapon, a blur at running back, receiver, and returning, finishing with 3,200 all-purpose yards and 41 touchdowns. Thomas was nicknamed the Black Mamba, and his stats proved it. Strike fast, strike hard, and strike deadly.
race to their sideline. Touchdown, Oregon!
All right, welcome back to the show. Let me go ahead and hold on. Let me just make sure. Where's my audio? If I have it, the second I take off my headphones, this happens. That is just delightful. Let me go ahead and see if I can hear it. Here we go. Check, mic check. All right, I think that I'm doing okay on this. There it is. Okay, found it on my mixer. Perfect. Okay. So I forgot a couple things that we're going to continue the last segment into the next, but this is a sort of mindset that I'm thinking about here, and I'm going to pop this one up again too. And we are going to go ahead and play this soundbite really quick. This was under a different video that I came across that Brandon the Duck comment on, and let's take a look at it.
Fly Rothstein sends this in. Let's take 2024's team and replace Dylan Gabriel with one of these quarterbacks. Who do you feel would have given us the best chance to win the Natty?
The best chance to win the Natty. Now, I do, this is not Spencer McLaughlin, who you should watch his show, Locked In Ducks, Locked On Ducks, and he runs a great show. I love watching his show. It's every day, daily. Very hard for me to do something like that, so more power to him, especially with everything else he's got going on. Again, I will try to make this show more consistent as time goes on. A lot of things have changed in my personal life in terms of explosion of gigs that I had to do this month, and so I couldn't put the effort into doing off-season shows as I could. But once the season starts, obviously there is going to be plenty of ability to do those shows and build on there from there. And if you want to be a part of that, just go ahead, like, subscribe, and comment down below. Even if you're a retard, go ahead and comment, please, because I welcome it, because I think it's hilarious when the retards spurg out with general nonsense. And no, this isn't me being triggered by that. I just love, it's fun when you're with your friends and you have, let's say, a bag of watermelons, and you have a baseball bat. Sometimes it's fun just to have someone throw a watermelon at you so you can hit it and watch it explode. Anyway, that was a fan question, obviously, to Spencer McLaughlin. And he obviously, in good fun, answered that question. But the question itself is what the major flaw is. Because here's the thing. Did Dylan Gabriel give up 34 points in the first half in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State? Was Dylan Gabriel guarding Jeremiah Smith? Was Dylan Gabriel a defensive lineman trying to get at Will Howard? Was Dylan Gabriel the defensive coordinator trying to out-chess match Chip Kelly? Was Dylan Gabriel Will Stein, who was trying to out-chess match Jim Knowles? Was Dylan Gabriel Dan Lanning, trying to out-chess match Just for Men Ryan Day? No? I don't think Dylan Gabriel was the issue, or the quarterback was the issue in that game. You could have replaced with Herbert, Marcus Mariota, Dennis Dixon, any of those listed quarterback-wise. The result probably would have been the same. Maybe the score would have been 34-14 at half. Maybe the score would have been 34-16. Maybe it would have been 34-21. But guess what? You're still losing the game. Because of defense. So, for as progressive and revolutionary that the Oregon program is, the fans need to start getting with the program. Because they're going in a different direction. They're trying to be a defensive team. I would trade the 60-point games for a 24-21 national championship win. I don't care. Because there's life, there's death, there's taxes, and defense wins championships. Winning is determined not by how many points you put up, but how many points you give away. Again, not trying to be Al Bundy here, but live through my past, but I'll say this. When I was in 6th grade on the football team, this particular year, we were a very good team. Very good team. And there was one game towards the end of the season where the final score was 8-0, and we won. I played left corner, free safety. As I got bigger into high school, I got moved to safety off of corner. Still played corner here and there, but I was mostly safety. But when I was younger, I played both. In that game, it was a defensive battle, obviously, with the final score being what it was. And guess what? I had to contribute more on defense than offense. I played both sides of the ball, but in my head, on the field, I knew, okay, this is a defensive battle. I need to lock in on defense. The offense will be the offense, but we got to play defense. Because all it took was 2 series to lose that game. 2 series. With 2 touchdowns, and then we were done. Over. Game over. Because our offense wasn't putting up anything. Defense wins championships. So at this point, we should probably just hedge our bets and expect not to win the national championship unless we know that we have that elite of a defense. And hopefully we're getting there. This year will be the litmus test of the type of roster that Lanning can build. I trust it, but also we're going to be a young team this year. So there's going to be games and things that will happen that might present traps for us, or us, the Ducks, for the team we cheer for. Might present traps or heart attack games that would otherwise not be that close, but they will be. Like the Wisconsin game last year. We'll have those types of games, and those growing pains of a young team we might lose some of those games. We just should hope that won't happen against the teams that we don't want to lose to, i.e. Washington, USC, Oregon State, so on and so forth. So there might be some growing pain games. So that's another factor you have to add in too. But you could still see how the roster will look even in potential tough losses. And you might just have such a talented team that age doesn't really matter. They might just ball out and win everything. Who knows? That's the thing. That's why I don't like predictions. I don't like preseason predictions. I don't like other shit like that. Because you just don't know. You don't know until the results are the results. And that's okay. Just live with it. And so you can determine, though, how your team might look next year, 2 years, so on and so forth. But this is the litmus test to the types of rosters that we should expect out of Oregon is this year, because now we don't have that layover from COVID era, crystal ball era, from the people that remained in the crystal ball era. This is all Dan Lanning now. This is where the rubber meets the road. However, again, it's defense. Defense, defense, defense. I would rather have a 50th ranked offense and a number 1 ranked defense. I really don't. That's what I would really want. I would still trust that team. I don't care if we average 20 points a game. If we have a defense that holds a team to 3 to 7 points a game, doesn't matter. We get those wins, and you win the big ones when the defense shows up. Because it's like that meme. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? How many times do these Duck fans have to learn this lesson? Every year. When the defense needs to step up, they're not there. It's like, what? And we saw a glimpse of that last season, for sure. And that was great. And that's why I was like, okay, a championship run is more possible than not. Until it wasn't. The big litmus test, though, this year, I think, is for Tosh Lapoy. Because he has some lessons that he had to learn, I think, and he should learn. And this is definitely, now that, again, the roster that is desired, built by this staff, is mostly on the defensive side. They got bigger, faster, stronger secondary. Excuse me. Secondary. And they're starting to develop linebackers, even though that's probably a little bit of a weak spot in the defense this year, outside of Bryce Betcher, even though there were some good things out of Mixon, Blake Purchase, Braden Klatt. Those guys, we just haven't seen much of them, like everything else. We saw a little bit more of the defensive line because they like to platoon the defensive line. And so I'm excited to see how that goes. But again, it's different when you're a starter. So we'll see how some of those guys handle being starters. This happened like 3 weeks to a month ago. This is why I try not to keep up on the news, because once the news happens, it's over. But this is also another reason why I want my dad here to discuss NIL, because so Oregon was struggling a little bit on the recruiting trail from about May to June. Really only had like 1 or 2 commits, and then like one of them flipped, and maybe both of them flipped, or we just didn't get them. But then we made up for it with a couple more good recruits, a flip. And then the beginning of the month, towards the end of July as well, we got Tank Jones, a 5-star out of Alabama. We stole it out of Alabama's backyard. And we got Devon Benjamin. And we lost out on Deuce Gerald's, a 4-star. I think, I can't remember where. Maybe LSU? Tennessee? I don't remember. Again, old news. But let's just say 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And when those 2 are the only 5, or are the 5-stars in that group, and we lose out on the 4-star, okay, that's a great win. Again, gone are the days now that Haloti Ngata was our generational talent, and we got him. We got him as a 5-star out of Utah, and that was the only 5-star. And he was probably the first 5-star that the Ducks ever got, and that was in 2002. And then Colvin was after that. Cameron Colvin was another 5-star. But again, it was only like 1 out of every roster. So amongst the other 5-stars that we've gotten, 2 out of 3 is pretty darn good, especially considering where we were at even 10, 15 years ago. So, but the funny thing, though, was after Tank Jones's commitment, it was the wailing and gnashing of teeth of the Alabama fans, talking about Nike's got the bag, and they bought Tank Jones from under us, and all this other kind of stuff. And what's really funny to me too is the best part is not only trolling the SEC into finally scheduling a nine game conference schedule, but the wailing and gnashing of teeth of Alabama fans of all people talking about Oregon's Nike money and all that. And let's do a little history lesson first. I've been on a very big history kick of this program. I'm pretty well versed on the history from the beginning of the program to today. So that's also why I'm not really afraid of hillbillies talking about disgraceful takes. And here's the thing. They talk about, look, Alabama obviously is a blue blood. Full stop. They're on the level of Ohio State. Okay. I can't say modern era, but and they don't all time. Yale actually has the most all time national championships, but they're up there. They're certainly more of a most national championship blue blood team than Yale is at this point now. The Bear Bryant era and then the Nick Saban era. But here's the thing, though, with the SEC. So the Good Old Boys Club is not just designated to Texas. You got that with pretty much every SEC team. And before NIL, it was always a wink and a nod and a Camaro and a co-ed to try to get that 5-star to join their squad. And now that that's basically legal, it doesn't really work much anymore. And it's really funny to hear them bitch, whine, and moan and complain about money being involved in recruiting now. Because it's like, well, maybe you don't have the monopoly on talent anymore because everyone can now give each 5-star a Camaro and a co-ed to be on their team. And the thing is, too, is especially on that region, I find the Big Ten has finally sort of not given respect, but acknowledged the history of the Oregon program more than the SEC. I'll say this. The Big Ten has educated themselves on teams like Oregon and other teams on the West Coast and not remained ignorant. But the SEC and the SEC fans, at this point, I feel like are willfully ignorant of what goes on beyond the Rocky Mountains and over the Mason-Dixon line. And they still have zero clue to what's going on the West Coast, and their takes have long been dead. They've dug them up from the cemetery and tried to revive them. And among the expired takes of soft West Coast football, which is ironic because half their team is probably from the West Coast, mostly California. Julian Sayin, who is now the starting quarterback of Ohio State, originally was committed to Alabama. Then Nick Saban retired and he transferred to to Ohio State because he wanted to play for Nick Saban. And when that option wasn't available, he transferred. With that being said, they should be more well-versed on West Coast teams, considering a large number of their talent is from there. Roderick Robertson Jr. is from Lincoln down here in San Diego, who is the running back for the Georgia Bulldogs. Again, another example of West Coast being on their rosters. They should have some sort of education on that. And I understand Oregon is still somewhat new, even though they're not. Oregon's program started 2 years after Alabama. Alabama, I believe, was 1892, and Oregon started their program by Cal Young, which is why there's a street and a district in Eugene named after him. It was started in 1894, and granted, Oregon wasn't as accomplished, even though arguably they should have been the 1916 and 1917 back-to-back national champions, but they were not. They were also one of the first Rose Bowl champions. I believe the first Rose Bowl was between Princeton and Brown in the early 1910s, and then they took a break from the Rose Bowl, which was called the East-West Tournament game at the time. They took a couple years off. Then it was Penn versus Oregon, and Oregon won, which is why the 2012 Rose Bowl was not Oregon's first Rose Bowl win. Technically, it was the 1918 Rose Bowl, I believe. Definitely mid to, let me get this right for the finicky Oregon 1917. All right, off a year, but that's also why in 2012 it was actually their second Rose Bowl victory, and they won. That was the first win in 95 years. So Oregon is not necessarily unaccomplished when it comes to their football teams, but certainly not as accomplished as a number of SEC teams. With that being said, though, Oregon had times of struggle, like every program does. Theirs was maybe a little bit longer. A lot of it was politics, administrative politics. They didn't like certain coaches. They were too hung up on coaches that changed the game. We're seeing parallels here in that soundbite that I played at the beginning. You heard the wonderful Kurt mention Shai Huntington and Hugo Bezdek. Hugo Bezdek was the legendary coach. He was very much the Chip Kelly of that time. And Shai Huntington was a former player who played under Hugo Bezdek that then became the coach after Bezdek left. They didn't like him very much. He wasn't getting the results they wanted, like Mark Helfrich. And they actually gave Hugo Bezdek the key to Eugene after he left to coach the Philadelphia Phillies. And they were trying at that time to actually get him to coach again. That ceremony was made up to get him to coach again. He did not take the offer. And then there was the Len Casanova era. And then after Len Casanova, there was another coaching carousel until Rich Brooks came along. And then the rest is history. And that history is after the 1994 Rose Bowl qualifying season. They didn't win the Rose Bowl. Mike Bellotti was starting to take over. Now, before this, during the Rich Brooks era, there was no Nike money. Phil Knight had basically, when he was at Oregon running track, he and Bill Bowerman, the coach of the track team in the 60s and 70s, built the Nike shoe, the early version of the Nike shoe. Well, like most businesses, it takes a while for it to pick up, and it wasn't really till the mid-90s that Nike became Nike. And it's the mid-90s because that was the era of Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan put Nike on the map when he put those shoes on and wore them to the game. It was around 95 to 96. Mike Bellotti was the coach. Now, after Rich Brooks left, and if you've ever been to Eugene or Autzen Stadium, MLK Jr. Boulevard runs alongside of Autzen Stadium. It's a main street, busy street, and players used to have to run across that street to go to the practice field across the street. That practice field is literally just an open field. And I think it's like the open field now that's like right in front of the parking lot of, I think, like the Eugene, I think it was a Health and Human Services building. That's literally all it was. It was just a mud slosh practice field. And each time these players would cross MLK Jr. Boulevard and they dropped a glove or something, that glove was gone. They would run across and it's like, when I show up with practice, this is it. So, Phil Knight saw the potential in the program after the 94 season. And he approached Mike Bellotti during practice one day, and he says, I would like to do everything in my power to make the program what I think it can be. What do you need? And Mike Bellotti said, I need an indoor practice facility. And thus the Mahosky Center was born. And now they're making the Mahosky Center 2.0, which is this big, amazing thing that looks a lot like Hayward Field now. And over the course of that time, the indoor practice facility was rebuilt. They reconstructed the practice facility. They expanded Autzen in 2001 as the team was picking up as well. And Nike invested in the uniforms. And they would test new uniform hypotheses on the Ducks team. And even then, Nike still gives more money to other teams. Penn State, I believe, was the first team to sign a deal with Nike for their uniforms, and Ohio State, I think, receives the most money through Nike. But the Ducks sort of became the guinea pigs. So they tested different materials with their uniforms. So anytime new materials would come along, naturally would come new designs. They would maybe try seeing now, as is the style, or the drip, as the young kids like to say, tried tighter uniforms. How tight can they get it so it's not easily grabbable by tacklers? How tight can they get the uniforms to fit comfortably or before they become uncomfortable? And they tested on Oregon. So it's only been about the last 30 years that Nike was even in the picture enough to make any sort of impact. And yes, Oregon recruiting got progressively better, but it wasn't just because of Nike money. It was before it was because the program was starting to build. And after scholarship caps took place, so Washington and USC couldn't hoard all the talent and give the breadcrumbs to the rest. The rest is sort of history, as you can say. But now with the NIL, a lot of people think money is a play, in which it is. But Oregon's NIL is competitive. It's not outrageous. It's competitive with the other teams. And yes, that is thanks to Nike and Phil Knight. But Oregon's recruiting was picking up before that. What's changed was really during Willie Taggart's era and then Mario Cristobal, where they actually tried to establish recruiting in Oregon. So the 4 and 5 stars weren't like, we're never going to get them, we're not even going to try. Now they tried, and they got some to come over. And does money make the moment a little sweeter? Sure. But the idea was, hey, we can compete with recruiting with these other teams and with these other teams and these other recruiting pipelines. And so what resulted from that, though, is exactly what I wanted to happen when Cristobal left, was getting someone from the SEC. Because, one, they have the blueprint. They know championship football. If we're going to be honest, the SEC is pretty good at determining, they're pretty good at building championship teams, with the obvious exceptions of those Big Ten teams and the USC teams of old. But I was like, we need a culture change. We need a team culture change, and we need a coach that can provide that. And granted, with Taggart and Cristobal, they didn't really bring that SEC stuff with them, but they brought the recruiting. And arguably, Cristobal did change the culture in that he was an offensive line guy, so he's like, we're going to build on the trenches. And so Lanning, though, was the perfect blueprint for what we needed. We needed a defensive-minded guy, an SEC guy, and a recruiter. We got all three. So, to the butthurt Alabama fans and SEC fans alike that complain, when we don't get the recruits, we're broke. But when we do, it's Nike money. So, you can't win for losing as a Duck. But that's okay. Because also, here's the thing, too, with the new era of recruiting, and it still happened back in the day, but now it's much, 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 much more prevalent, is honestly, for me, until they put that uniform on and play on the field, they're not as committed as the commitment announcement would like them to say. Oregon's flipped some people flip from Oregon. It just is the way it is now. So it's really not that big of a deal. But it is just funny listening to the SEC and Alabama fans sort of complain that it's kind of like the Alabama Jones joke from Shane Gillis and Nick Saban kind of getting butthurt about it. It was quite funny because it's true. And the SEC doesn't have the monopoly on the good old boys club anymore, and tossing a Scat Pack key fob to a recruiter and winking as they walk away. Unfortunately, though, continuing the sort of roster discussion, Jurion Dickey has been indefinitely suspended, probably for behavioral problems. It seems like, according to Dan Lanning, it was, not really being locked in practice and not wanting to show up, which is unfortunate because he was one of the few I was looking forward to finally seeing playing time. I know he's gone through a lot and in his life, and then on the Oregon team dealing with injuries, and I'm sure those frustrations sort of added up. However, you still have to take your lashes and sort of accept not the consequences, but sort of accept things that happen to you in life. Injuries suck. They're really irritating. I've had plenty, and I've had plenty that have kept me out of playing time, and it's not fun to deal with, and it's really frustrating, and I get it, but sometimes you just have to accept it and try to press harder, move forward from there. I'm hoping he can do that, and I'm hoping it can still be with the Ducks, because he is a talent, and with Evan Stewart gone too, it would have been nice to at least have him too, even though the wide receiver room is still looking pretty good, and I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see guys like Cooper Perry, Dylan Gresham, Kyler Casper. I'm hoping he had some injury issues too. I'm hoping to see maybe him sort of break out and overcome that adversity in the same vein as Jurion Dickey. And I mean, LeGarrette was suspended for most of the season, almost a full season for his stuff, and he came back with the Ducks a little bit, but then definitely in the pros, he came back with full force and really built a name for himself and overcame that low moment against Boise State. So I'm hoping Jurion Dickey can be that type of guy too, and in a much more impactful way for longer than LeGarrette Blount. So that is also what I'm looking forward to see. I'm glad that we are only 6 days away from kickoff, and we finally get to see everything that we've been yelling at each other about and punching each other in the face about, and looking through our green and yellow glasses about, and actually see the results on the field and see. Trey McNutt is another one that's out for a couple months, which is a bummer. Was really looking forward to seeing him. Hopefully he can have a speedy recovery and come back in October, November, and play to the level that we know he's capable of and that he knows he's capable of. Luckily, I say luckily because most of my injuries have been muscle related, like sprains, ligament tears, and everything. Luckily, his is a bone fracture, and those ones you just sit and rest, let it reset properly, and you're mostly back to normal. It's the ligaments and the muscle injuries that remain for basically the rest of your life. I remember I sprained my ankle really bad. My body went into shock, and my basketball coach at the time said I would have rather broken my ankle than sprained it, and he was right. I would have much rather broken it than sprained it, because that shit follows you. And so I say luckily for Trey McNutt that is a break, because obviously with the rest he will have some atrophy in that muscle, but the muscle doesn't necessarily need to repair as much as it would if it was like a ligament tear or something like that. It's just that the recovery and strength, it won't a lot of the main reasons why if you tear an ACL as a player and you come back, even if you're good to go and all your vitals, or your physiognomy or whatever vitals are good, you're probably not going to tear the ligament again, whatever, you recovered well, you rehabbed well. There's still that mental thing. You're like, if I make this cut, like the same cut that tore my ACL the first time, will it happen again? And you just get in your head about it. But with like fractures and stuff like that, once they're like you're good to go, there's still something there where you're like, ooh, I might break it again, but it's less than like an ACL tear. or major musculoskeletal injuries like that. So with that being said, Trey McNutt, I'm hoping can do that and recover well and come back with full strength and full force. And I'm looking forward to this season. I'm looking forward to what I'm going to see. I'm looking forward to enjoying the Ducks with fellow Duck fans. And just being a nice atmosphere for a Duck community, because that's what I want to build, like kind of like a Sports Chat 503, where it's Duck fans being Duck fans. But even Ryan will admit when his Ducks have flaws. He doesn't always wear the green and yellow glasses, but that's the thing about community, is you can talk about it together, and you don't have to be a dick about it. And you can still have certain disagreements, but you can also talk about it, because you know what? Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're right. Who knows? Did my basketball team deserve to be in the 7A championship game? Yes. But we didn't belong in the AAU championship. And you don't have to insult people who are cheering on the same team as you. This has been good, I feel like. This has been a good talk. Very therapeutic for everybody. Just kidding. But here's the thing. This is the issue that I have with a number of people on the internet. Is people are just fucking stupid. I'm sorry. They are. They really are. Because here's the thing. If you're talking to someone, it's kind of the Mike Tyson theory, but it's like if you're talking to someone in real life, you would not behave a certain way. You wouldn't behave like a 4-year-old toddler that the parents didn't buy you Cookie Crisp at the store. So you throw a tantrum and roll around all over the floor and embarrass your parents. You would actually talk it out. And people feel free to just fire off their mouths without actually thinking critically. And that's a problem, because also this is also why I don't want to be a hot take merchant, but I guess I am now. T-shirts coming soon. I'm gonna wear it. That's gonna be the brand, I guess. Hot take merchant. Should I start talking like Stephen A. Smith? That was a bad impression. Who cares? The thing is, though, is that people on the internet are just stupid. They really are. And I know I'm on here. And again, though, I'm not really denying I can ever have stupid moments. That's the difference. That other people on the internet think that they're the smartest person in the room. And they get mad if someone else has another informed opinion than yours. And I'm not one of those people like, well, it's my opinion, and it's like my child, and this just is what it is. But here's the thing. I came to my conclusions, not like Aaron Fentress, which is just a pessimist. I think he's one of those, battered wives as far as it comes to being a Duck fan. I'm not a pessimist necessarily in that way. I just call it as I see it, and the numbers don't lie, okay? 41st, third string QB on his third game. And you had him playing like that. 41st. Miles behind the rest of the teams. So yes, they earned their spot by winning the games, yes. But you can still acknowledge there are teams that you just don't belong on the field with. And unfortunately, it was the vector of the game and the teams, the matchups. Just is what it is, and it's okay to accept it. That 2014 team wasn't as strong as, again, the green and yellow glasses. That 2014 team wasn't as strong of a team as everyone remembers it to be. They only take the metric of they made the national championship game. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. The only problem is when you're not good, your luck runs out. And unfortunately for the Ducks, they're quite snake-bitten in that way where their luck runs out at really, really bad times. So, I think I sort of forgot everything I had on my rundowns. I think I ran through all the segments, and it is past midnight. I normally will not be doing these shows late, but the intervention was necessary because we have got, as I say we, not the team. The team is doing their thing, but we as Duck fans have got to stop with this obsession with offense. Is it cool when we score touchdowns and when we score 7 of them? Sure. But we can't have these other fatal flaws on the teams and ignore them just for that. Okay, the gameplay might have evolved, but the game has not. And defense still wins championships. And that's the lens that everyone needs to start looking at this anymore. No more 56 to 55 games. Because every season that has happened, we've had one game where suddenly we only score 18, 19 points, and then we wonder what happened. What happened was we don't have a team that can hold the other team to under 18 points. Jameis Winston wasn't completely wrong when he said only a few plays kept us from winning that game. And but again, they were the third worst team in that 4-person playoff. In fact, looking back on it, people argue Florida State probably shouldn't have been in that playoffs. They frankly shouldn't have been there. And it was just, otherwise it would have been a close game, really, if it wasn't for those turnovers, and especially that one that was kind of a fluke fumble, that Jameis Winston falls back and fumbles the ball and they return it for a touchdown. Again, that game was sort of long kind of done at that time, but I think it would have been a different story if the seeding was different. If we played Ohio State in the first round or we played Alabama in the first round, we probably don't win that game. Which is sad because, again, Marcus Mariota was the Heisman Trophy winner. He deserved everything that team achieved. But there's no denying the truth. That's the truth of the matter. And if you want to be bummed about it, fine. Just don't kill the messenger. Or do. I don't really care. Because I'm not going to stop saying what's true in that regard. Because, again, there you have players and teams that will give themselves a hard truth. Like, it was always a joke, and on every team that I played, that we would always get yelled at more when we won than when we lost from the coaches. And if you're not used to that, that's fine. But that's just the way it is. Those are the facts of the matter. And the fact of the matter is Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's the bottom line. Because the scoreboard says so. So, here's to this season, though. And a lot of exciting things about to happen. And I'll probably see you at some point this week leading up to the Montana State game, the first game. Not really a whole lot of speculating you can necessarily do on it, but we'll see. Week 0 was a little, I missed most of the games. I caught mostly highlights. It kind of just snuck up on me, especially since this was also the first week of high school football, and I was covering that on Friday night and into Saturday. So I wasn't able to really sit down and watch. I'm really bummed, though, that the kickoff times, it seems like this season for Oregon, are earlier in the day as opposed to last year when they're all freaking at night. And I had to get up to go to work at 2:30 in the morning. But now it's not going to be an issue. I'm going to be able to catch these games and hopefully catch up and keep up on these shows. And these will happen a little more often starting this week. And we're gonna have a fun ride no matter which way it goes. Again, college football with Sam is a great way to go over everything, and I agree with him that our floor is probably 8-4, and our ceiling is probably going to be 12-0. If we could do another undefeated, again, seems unlikely, but that is the ceiling. On paper, that is the ceiling. And it's not a thing where, every team could go 12-0. It's possible, but then also our floor could be about 8-4, and likely will be about 10-2. And we're just hoping that second loss won't be to USC, Washington, or Oregon State, and the only one loss will be to Penn State, and we go 11-1. Here's the thing, though. This is also the strategy for everybody. Now there's a playoff. You get hot in the playoff. Just make the playoff and be on a heater when you make it. That's what happened with Ohio State last year. I said this all year last year. 13-0 was fun, but I was waiting for the other shoe to drop because we got hot right about October into November, and then I started seeing the dip, especially in the Big Ten championship game. And that's when I was like, oh boy, if we play Ohio State again, we're screwed. And I didn't think we were that screwed, but I thought we were probably going to end up losing that game. Just not by that much. And that's the thing, though. And you learn that when you are on a team that has playoff capabilities, when you're playing for a team and looking at other teams that have done it before. And when I was on the team, I was also around the 2007 national champions, baseball national champions at Oregon State. And I believe, if I remember correctly, at the very least, they barely made postseason and barely made the World Series. And if I remember correctly, it was the ASU head coach, baseball head coach, that basically said OSU should be in the regional, super regional World Series. Like, he basically tried to get them in, and they won the whole thing that year. Their second in a row. They got hot. They got hot in the postseason, and that is the absolute thing you need to do. So if you're not playing well in the regular season, but you make the playoff, just make sure you are the buzzsaw in the playoff. Get on a heater in the postseason. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do in September. It matters a little more, but still less in October. And it matters more, but not as much in November. What really matters is what you do in December and January. So if the Ducks don't win every game, that's fine. If they make the playoff, that's great. And if they make a run in the playoff, that's excellent. And that's what they need to do. They need to get hot when the moment is right. They can't start off hot and then fizzle out. Okay. I think I'm done. So please like, subscribe to the channel and all that good call of action bullshit. And make sure to keep up to date on certain things. I will be a little more consistent live streams, and I'll be a little bit more consistent on my timing and not doing an after dark. Unless I do something like an after dark could now just be post game stuff. And if you involve yourself in the chat, we can have a discussion and go much longer. But in the meantime, I shall see you later, and it won't be too late. I don't know. I'll figure out another